You've heard the term in restaurants from the farm to the table. So I want to basically today, I want to take you from the table to the farm. I want to go back to the farm. I want to talk about the issue of the harvest today. We are in the fall. It's bow hunting time. It's, we love the harvest. It's just a great time in New York as well, upstate New York. It's just gorgeous, a lot like Michigan. And we're just so accustomed to it. I think sometimes we forget some of the principles of the harvest and how they apply to the ministry and how they apply to our lives. And I just want to remind you of a few things today that I think will encourage you. Back in Genesis, God said this, after the flood of Noah, God said this, he said, as long as the earth remains, there will be planting and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, and day and night. So what God was saying is that planting and harvest is going to be, these are seasons that are going to endure through the end of time. Wherever there's planting, there will be a harvest. And so planting and harvest, it's a natural physical principle. We know that. I've been doing a little hunting while I've been back, and I just love it. I'm hunting off an alfalfa field, and you can see the I think it's alfalfa anyway. And I've been in New York too long. It's grass. It looks like grass, but a few months ago that was just dirt, and now that grass is coming up, and it's just an amazing thing. And what I want to just encourage you with today is that everything you do is planting for a harvest. Everything you do. And so I just want to give you 7 quick laws of the harvest that I know it's going to encourage you. But I really feel as a church that it's good to be reminded of these things, because so many of you that are serving, volunteering here, serving as parking lot and ushers and money counters and children's church workers and the Green Beret toddler and preschool workers. Sometimes you don't see a result right off the bat, do you? Yeah, and sometimes you think you're wasting your time, but I promise you, as you're investing into the work here, into the kingdom, there will come a harvest out of that. Some of you that worked in children's church and nursery and toddlers that took care of my kids when they were little, you invested in them, and now they're leading other people. And so that's just the principle of the harvest. So John 4, it said, Jesus explained, my nourishment comes from doing the will of God who sent me, and from finishing his work. You know the saying, 4 months between planting and harvest. But I say, wake up and look around. The fields are already ripe for harvest. The harvesters are paid good wages, and the fruit they harvest is people being brought to eternal life. And what joy awaits both the planter and the harvester alike. One plants and another harvests, and it's true. I sent you to harvest where you didn't plant. Others have already done the work, and now you will get to gather the harvest. So everything in life starts out as a seed, whether it be a relationship, whether it be a marriage, whether it be a business, and especially a church. There came a point, 70-something years ago, that there was a group of people that loved God that said, we have a vision for a church. And today we are the beneficiaries of those decisions that were made way back then. You're sitting in a pew today because somebody had a vision for that. And so I want to just look at one of the first laws of the harvest that I think is one of the most important of the laws, is that we are the fruit of someone's generosity. We are the fruit of someone's generosity. So let me just share with you what I mean by that. So in October of 1981, there was a woman that belonged to this church named Judy that was reaching out to me and witnessing to me and sharing Christ with me. And she sent me a graduation card in the mail with a scripture on it, and kind of messed me up a little bit. And I started to communicate with her, and she kept inviting me to come to church. I had never been to a church like this, nor did I ever want to come to a church like this. And so she invited me to come to church, and it was probably part curiosity and part just trying to get her off my back. So I said, okay, I'll come to church on Sunday. Well, on Saturday night, I went out and I tied one on. Can you say that here? See, in New York, that's totally cool. All right. So I just really got messed up, and I had the worst hangover you could ever have. But I was committed. I was a man of my word. I was going to go visit this church. So I went to this church on Carpenter Road, and one of the ushers, I think it was Brother Goodrow, greeted me at the door. What a sweet man. I had long hair and a leather jacket and jeans and was sick as a dog. And what does he do? He brings me right up and sits me in the front row. Place was packed. Brother Lobbs was singing, Our God Reigns. Remember Brother Lobbs? No? Okay. He's singing. Everyone's raising their hands, and I'm getting a little wigged out, like, what is this? And then one of the guys sitting next to me starts speaking in another language really loud. I said, what the heck is that? And as he starts speaking in this language, and then someone from the choir speaks in English, and I'm like, I thought it was a secret code, like those secret codes you guys had on the screen today, like AQ497. Like, we got Foxtrot Alpha Bravo. We've got a live one over there. And I wasn't sure if you guys were going to get me out of here or what. You guys scare me out here, man. This whole militia thing. I'm just kidding. Everyone always asks me that. You're from Michigan? Do you know the militia? I'm like, oh, yeah, it's my family. Yeah, absolutely. You got to mess with them, right? We have the mafia out there. We have the militia here. So I don't know, whatever. See, I completely forgot what I was talking about. Oh, yeah. So I'm in that service, and Pastor Chris at the time, he preached the message. And I honestly, I was like, get me out of here, man. This is just wigging me out. But there was something in my heart that was, something was happening. Some of you that came here the first time, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was really hot in there that day, sweating. So when I got out, I thought, I did my thing. I came, I'll get her off my back. I'm done. I don't ever have to do this again. And doggone it, I came back on Wednesday night to the youth group. And it was there that I gave my life to Jesus in October of 1981. Isn't that crazy? But this is the thing. Somebody had a vision to plant a seed long before I ever came the first time, so that there was a church there for me to give my life to Jesus at. And what you're doing today is planting a seed for someone that you might not ever meet in this side of heaven, that's going to find Jesus tomorrow because of what you're doing today. We are all recipients of someone else's generosity. That's the way the kingdom works. About 1991, some of you are going to remember this, on a Saturday morning, we gathered in here. It was all dirt. And right about here, about 3 feet down in the dirt underneath the cement, is a great big container filled with prayer requests and dreams and visions of what we wanted to see God do. Does anyone remember that? It's right here. Right here. I kind of want to bust that up and read those, don't you? Let me know when you do that. I'll come back for that. Some of those things probably have come to fruition, and some of them haven't yet. But those were seeds that were planted in faith of what God was going to do. Everything's a seed, man. So we're the fruit of someone else's generosity. Number 2, today is the father of tomorrow. Today is the father of tomorrow. Now, what I mean by that is that where we are today and what we are today, who we are today, is a result of decisions and choices that we made decades ago in a lot of cases that have brought us to where we're at today. If your life's a mess, your life's a train wreck, it's probably because there was some sowing in some areas, and now you're reaping a harvest, and life is really crazy. The good news is this: God can turn that thing around on a dime. Yeah. But we are where we are today because of decisions that we made. And so as a church, let me just say this. As a church, you are where you're at today because of decisions that were made. And the things that you're doing now will affect the tomorrow. So let me just share with you my story. So at the harbor, about 10 years ago, I started to see a whole generation of young people coming up behind us. And there was no room for them to be developed and lead. It was more like we were expecting them to fit in with our style, our mindset. But there was no room for them to have expression on their own, and there was no freedom for that. And God had spoken to me about that scripture in Chronicles that says about the men of Issachar, and they knew the times and understood what to do. And so I got with my elders and I said, we need to do something now, because if we don't, in 10 years, we will be irrelevant. And Long Island, you'd think it'd be progressive. It's really old school and very conservative. It's kind of like going back in time of what churches maybe were like here in the 60s or 70s. It's bizarre. New York City, there's some cutting-edge churches, but Long Island, on the most part, is just totally old school, and most of the churches are running under 100 people, and most of the people in the churches are in their 60s and 70s. So we started to do some crazy things. We painted our ceiling black, and I lost about 10 families. Seriously, because we painted the ceiling black. We started to change our worship expression. We started to do things a little bit differently. And I lost another handful of families. You know, I believe that's a new spiritual gift, and I'm excelling at that, which is blessing other churches with our people. Man, you know, you'd like God to throw you a bone once in a while and say, what you're doing is right. No, whenever we did it, we'd lose another, you know. My leadership stuck with me. I think they doubted for a long time, but they stuck with me. And so we started to make room for the next generation to come up behind us. And let me just say this, man. There comes a point in any generation where we need, it's like a relay race. And there comes a point where you've got the baton, but there's a short amount of time where that person running behind you comes up, and both of you have your hand on that baton at the same time before the guy in front lets go. And so we started doing that. We were one of the first churches on Long Island to go in this direction. There was just a couple more, 3.5 million people. 10 years later, let me fast forward. We're planting campuses. We've got our church, the culture in our church is a young adult culture. And I've been, for 10 years, encouraging folks in my age group, say, look at, you and I were in the trenches for so many years, but now it's time for us to be fathers and mothers in the faith and begin to mentor these young people. That's our role now. Now, some of the music that our worship guys choose, you know, it's a little different. You know, if I want to really torture them, I'll just get them in staff meeting and play an Imperials album or something. It would blow their mind. They would run out screaming with blood coming out of their eyes. It's crazy. But the thing is God gave me a vision of what we needed to do. And, you know, I've had the humble privilege for the last 2 years to lead the evangelical pastors on Eastern Long Island in Suffolk County. And we've got about 150 churches represented with there. And I want to just say this, that out of those 150 churches, I would say 140 of them are in a state of decline. And they come to me on a regular basis. Now, those that criticized me back in the day now come to me and say, what can we do to turn around our culture so that we can start attracting young people? And the reality is, I tell them all this. I said, number one, you're going to expect to lose people. Number two, it's not going to happen overnight. You're looking at probably 10 years. That's the law of the harvest. I don't know any crop that you plant and 10 minutes later you have a full stalk of corn. Do you know anything? See, this is the thing. We get all twisted up about preferences. And there's a difference between a preference and a principle. Let me just say this. Principles are biblical principles. They're foundational. How many agree that the word is the word, the gospel is the gospel, Jesus is Jesus? We should never compromise on principles, right? But preferences are different. Because you might not like black ceilings. You might not like Hillsong or Jesus Culture worship, but you might like some of the stuff that was back in. You know what I find, that most of us, the era that we were saved in, and the music and the expression that we were saved in, those are precious times for us. But you can't stay there, can you? I don't think you're ever going to want me to come back, Pastor Rob. You can't stay there. Because the principle is we preach the word of God. People come to Jesus. We're here to transform lives. But preferences, I might just have to lay down a few things that I have maybe elevated higher in my life that maybe God would want me to elevate. I mean, my guys on my staff, they pay money for jeans that are ripped all over. What is that about? And the skinny jeans? Can you imagine me in skinny jeans? I'd look like a Kogel something that would just, you'd have to go through counseling, man. So, we have the hipster thing going on out on the East Coast, and oh my God, they're wearing skinny jeans and the black glasses, and their waists are about this big, and I come on, I'm like a walrus, I come on, hey, what are you doing? So, that's okay. That's okay. Because I get it, because I know the culture that they're trying to impact, and it's just so awesome now that we've got young adults coming in, that we just had a thing on Friday night called Meet the Movement. We had, maybe 20 churches on Long Island. Our church was the one who spearheaded it, and they met at the old Grumman Studios on Long Island, which is now a movie production studio. It's where they film the Avengers. We had that hangar, and there was about 500 young adults from all over Long Island that gathered Friday night. And half of them were unchurched, invited by someone. Meet the Movement. No church had their name on it. No pastor had their name on it. It was a movement. My generation, I'd want my name on that thing, man. Let me open up in prayer. Oh, Lord, thank you that the harbor was here to provide all of this. And we'd ruin it. Stay out of it, man. Let the young people run with it. They need our wisdom. We've made enough mistakes. We can say, no, stop, no, you don't do that. But our young people, these young pastors on staff, they know how to reach this culture. Good Lord, you and I don't. And what you'll find happens is when the young people start to come to Jesus, because the atmosphere is conducive for them to be disarmed. They come in, they hear the gospel, which is a principle that's not changed. They give their life to Jesus. You know what happens? Their grandparents start to come because they're so excited their grandkids are coming. You get the older ones anyway. What is in this stuff, man? This is what I want to remind you with. When you plant a seed, there's a season where that seed remains hidden, and you can't see anything happening. It's under the surface. You trust in the process, and you say, I'm going to plant something, and there's going to come a day where I might or might not see the harvest, but I know, I have faith that something's happening to the unseen eye. And so things that you're doing today, you are planting seeds that tomorrow you're going to see the fruit of them. 10 years later for us, we see an amazing amount of fruit from the decisions that we made, and we took a hit for some of them. But I wouldn't trade it for anything, because I see a young adult culture on Long Island they're going to transform the whole New York City area. I know it. How many like avocados? Random, right? You're like, 70s were not good for me. I'm just the 70 era. I did way too, I'm not even going to confess anything, but forgive me, Lord. Avocados. New Yorkers love avocados. I think New Yorkers would put guacamole in their Fruit Loops if they could. But do you know this? If you wanted to plant an avocado tree because you want to have avocados from the land that you planted these, and I grew this avocado. Do you know if you did that, you'd have to wait 7 years before you ever grew one avocado? That's like getting a dinner reservation 7 years from now at a restaurant that you like, right? See, the process takes time. Don't always look at what's seen and make a judgment call, but trust in what's unseen. Never doubt in the darkness what God has given you in the light. Trust in the process. Number 3. I'm almost done. Be out here by 5:30 or so. Number 3, what is planted is what will grow. So don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So let's not get tired of doing what is good. At just the right time, we will reap a blessing, harvest a blessing if we don't give up. Therefore, whenever we have the opportunity, we should do good to everyone, especially those in the family of faith. If I plant crabgrass in my yard, I can't expect to have Kentucky bluegrass growing in the spring. If we don't start planting for the next generation to come behind us, we're going to get exactly what we've planted today in the next season. So it's time that we start to say, you know what? We've got sons and daughters, granddaughters and grandsons. There's a generation out there, and this is what's different about my generation. When I was in my journey looking for God, the first place I would go is a church to find answers. That's the way it was when we grew up. It's not that way anymore. This generation, they don't buy into the whole corporate worship thing as easy. It's about community to them. That's why social media is so big, and Facebook and Twitter and all the hundreds of other things that are out there. Because it's a community. Now, we know that it's a shallow community, but they're looking for a community that's big to this generation that's coming up behind us. So our responsibility is that we have to set the table so that there's authentic community. Community that's vulnerable, community that's safe. That we might even... One of the mottos that we have at our church that we actually had heard it from another church is that it's okay to belong even if you don't believe yet. Think about that. It's okay. Some of our parking lot people aren't even saved yet. They're the most committed we have. Now, I wouldn't let them teach a class, but they can hold a sign up that says, "Welcome to church." Jesus was all about community, right? This can happen in our personal lives if a lot of times we want God to bless something in our lives that we've planted that we all know the whole time that God is not pleased with, and we want God to bless that thing. And that's not the way it works. That's kind of what happened with Cain and Abel. You know, God... in Genesis 3, pronounced judgment on the woman giving childbirth, but then he pronounced the ground to be cursed. Remember that? And then in the next chapter, you see Cain and Abel, and there had to be a conversation with God. We're not privy to that, but there had to be a conversation of what was an acceptable sacrifice and offering, because Abel hit it out of the park. But it says and it said Abel gave the best of his flock to God, but it just, under Cain, it just said he gave some of the fruit from the ground. Well, God cursed the ground, didn't he? So he's presenting something to God that God already said he was displeased with, and he wanted God to bless it. And when God didn't, he got an attitude. Because God saw something in his heart. And I say all that just to say this. The way we live our lives... We can either plant righteousness, things of righteousness in our lives. We can make decisions that it's kind of like putting money away in a savings account that we know that in the future there's going to be a huge payoff. Or we can live for the lust of the flesh. We can live for the ways of the world. And because you don't see an immediate payday, you can be deceived and say, well, it's not hurting me. That thing in my life is not hurting me because there's no evidence that... You know, I've got it under control. But what you don't realize is that those are seeds in the ground, and there will come a harvest. So God has given us this incredible opportunity to plant things in our life that are going to reap a harvest of blessing. But we all know people, and maybe some of you are here. You said, man, my life's a disaster. Cut me off. I'm done. Okay, I didn't know. Get him out of here. So, AQ 420. That means get him off the platform. Take him out the side. Get the wire ties out. I'm not going out without a fight, though, Pastor Rob. I'm going to make a scene here, man. Get the mace out. You're going to have to mace me. Oh. I'm going to get a case of that to take back with me, man. The Harbor Church is going to be like lit after we get back. Sorry. Number 4, I better move on. Number 4, we always harvest more than we plant. The harvest is not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's not one seed per plant. But if you plant a kernel of corn, one kernel of corn in the ground, that stalk will produce on an average of 2 ears of corn. And each ear of corn will produce between 600 and 800 kernels. So you got about 1,600 kernels that come out of one single kernel that you plant in the ground. It's amazing. When you give your resources here. When you give your time, when you give your talent and ability, when you give your resources here and you invest, you're planting seeds. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. It's multiplication. It's not addition. It could be 1,000-fold. That's the beauty of the harvest. That's a promise that is just so amazing. So this year, for the first year, I wanted to plant a garden. And so I've got a deck. It's about 15 by 15. And so I built this. I came out about 3 feet and about 15 feet long, and I came up with some ties. And I thought, I'm going to plant this garden. I want to work the ground. I want to be independent. I went to Home Depot because I didn't have time to wait for the seeds. I got the plants. I'm talking about seeds here. That should be point number 8, but we're going to just skip past that. I don't have time to wait for the seeds, so that's another sermon. We just want to start with the plants. That's your sermon next week. So I go to Home Depot, and so I get looking in their garden section. I start seeing all these plants, and my mind is like, wow, this is amazing. So I'm like, okay, well, 3 tomato plants would be great, but 4 would be better. So I put 4 in there. We got to have 2 or 3 zucchini plants in there, and you got to have 2 or 3 pepper plants, and then strawberries, come on, so 4 or 5 of those. And when I planted them, it looked fine. They were all about that far apart. It's amazing. It was like Jurassic Park in my backyard, man. The tomato plants just overtook everything because I didn't understand the principle that you always harvest more than you plant. It just took over. Matthew 13 says, the seed cast on good earth is the person who hears and takes in the good news and then produces a harvest beyond his wildest dreams. But then Hosea gives the other side of the coin where it talks about people who have not invested the things of God in their life. And he said they have planted the wind and will harvest the whirlwind. You know, people that their life is like a whirlwind of problems. Which one would you rather invest in your life? As a church, what would you rather invest in? Things that a fad or something that's not going to be here in a year or two, or you want to invest in things for the next generation that you are creating sustainability for Trinity Assembly of God? That this church is going to be here 20, 30, 40 years from now and stronger than it ever has been. You and I might not see that, right? We're all part of we're all links in the chain. You know, I remember when we were building this building, and I remember going down the hallway in a Bobcat with my little 2-year-old son between my legs and digging out stuff and working here. And Pastor Chris bought a dump truck with no brakes. I don't understand what that was about. You remember that old dump truck? It didn't even have a floor in it, man. And there was no fabric on the seats. It was just springs. So you get in and you look through the springs right down to the ground. And so I said, it doesn't have any brakes. He goes, just roll it against the curb. It'll stop you. What? It was cheap. And I didn't tell you about the wasp that love that. See, that's where I got stung. I knew it. Now it just made sense to me. My goodness. You don't just reap what you sow. You always reap more. Number 5, I'm almost done. The corn doesn't pick itself. It says in John 4, Jesus, I'll set this up. Remember when he met with the Samaritan woman? And the disciples were wanting him to eat. And he said, no, I have to go. It says, so he left Judea and returned to Galilee. He had to go. So everyone say had to go. he had to go through Samaria on the way. Why? You're looking at 500 years of racial tensions, hostilities. The Jews hated the Samaritans. Samaritans hated the pious Jews. It was horrible. And Jesus said, no, I have to go this way. Why? Because Jesus knew that there was going to be a woman waiting there that day by the well that needed her life transformed. And so there was some pre-planning that took place. Jesus kind of set it up, and we know there was a great harvest there among the Samaritans. I don't know a farmer that goes out and plants a field, but has no tractor, no combines, no silos, just throws some seeds, and then he comes out one day, and the field's growing, and he goes, what in the world is all this? And then he says, man, I got to go buy a tractor. I got to go build some silos. I've got to buy a combine. No. Every farmer worth its salt. How many here are not fake farmers, real farmers? Raise your hand. Now, see, I would consider myself a New York farmer planting those tomato plants. That's not what I'm talking about. John, I know you're a farmer. You know, in New York, not in any of our three, not one person raised their hand. See, New Yorkers need to come and learn some stuff. But you know that before you even plant anything in the ground, you make sure your tractor runs, right? You make sure your combines are working, right? Do you have some silos on your property? 2 silos. You want a field trip after church. They're going to host a big dinner and lunch, and they're going to show you their silos. I'm going to stand over here for a while. There's a lot, see, there's a vision before one seed is planted that there's a preparation that has to take place in order so that when that harvest is ready, you can get it up, because if you don't reap it, it will rot. And there have been so many times in church culture that we look at the world and how horrible it is, and we don't want any part of it, and we've let fields full of souls rot because we haven't made room to reap the harvest. It breaks my heart. And this is the thing, man. We all have this theology, and I'm not bashing it, but, whoa, bless God, things are going to get worse before Jesus comes. We all think that. Well, all right. But if that's where I'm at, why am I ever going to invest in this world now? If I'm just convinced that it's hopeless and useless, things probably will get worse. But I think the darker that it gets, the opportunities for people to come to Jesus are going to be greater than ever. And this is the other thing. Number 6 says Jesus pointed out a harvest the disciples didn't want. Come on now. Oh boy. I'll see you in another 15 years. Yeah, buddy. No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. Pastor didn't even know what I was preaching on today, so he didn't give me a list of things to go over. It's probably good, then the way you can just blame it all on me. So if you have a problem with this message, just Pastor Rob at trinityassembly.org. The disciples bought into the whole thing. The Samaritans were dogs. There was tensions, generational tensions, decades, centuries of tension. They wanted Jesus to eat a meal. And Jesus was saying, I have to do this. Listen, just check this out in the message. I love the Message paraphrase. It said, Jesus said, the food that keeps me going is that I will do the work of the one who sent me, finishing the work that he started. And as you look around right now, wouldn't you say that it is almost 4 months until time for the harvest? Well, I'm telling you to open your eyes and take a good look at what's right in front of you. These Samaritan fields are ripe. It's harvest time. We're more concerned with a meal than a mission. I just want to be fed. I want to come to church. I want to hear good music. I want to hear a great message because God needs to challenge everyone else. Preach it, Pastor. That was a hard message. They needed to hear that, bless God. We were never meant to be a cruise ship. We're a search and rescue vessel. And they're not the prettiest, but they save lives. And it's time that we get our eyes off the meal and start looking at what the mission is. You know, there's going to be people that come in this church and walk in these doors that you're not going to agree with their lifestyle. You might have some hang-ups racially, and you might, oh boy, what's happening? You know, you might have a lot of things that you don't like, but I'm telling you, Jesus is saying you have to do this. There's a harvest out there of souls, and this church could look really different in a few years, but isn't it a great thing when people are coming into the kingdom of God and lives are changed? I did a series. I think you probably lost about 50 people today, but I'll encourage you, man. I've been there. I'm just kidding. I'm joking. I'm seriously joking. No, I'm just. Forgive me again, will you? Good Lord, 2 cases of that water in the back of my truck. This Flint water is awesome, man. I'm just saying. My teeth are loose today, but I don't know what. It's just awesome. Oh, gosh, you're going to get mail on that one. What was I saying? Oh, yeah. We did a series. We always try to get a pulse. Sometimes as pastors, I'm not saying your pastor does this, I know he doesn't, but sometimes us pastors, we're trying to answer questions that no one's asking. Well, you need to understand sanctification. No, we do need to understand that, but that's a class. There's people coming in here that are desperate to find answers to their problems in their life. And every year we do a summer series. It's a big series, and we try to get a pulse on what's going on. And so remember last year when they passed, the Supreme Court passed the whole ruling on the gay marriage issue and all of that, and so we knew that was, you know, especially in New York, that's a big thing, and I know it is all over, but so we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of people buzzing about it, and I thought we're going to do a series, and we called it a taboo series. So we dealt with difficult topics in that series, and it wasn't a more of a preaching series. It was having a conversation, a family chat about some of these issues. And so the Sunday that I was going to address, how does God view marriage? So we were addressing the gay marriage issue because it had just been passed a few days before, and transgender issues. How does God view all that? And how should a Christian respond to all that? Man, I was shaking in my boots before I went up on that platform. But we had a conversation. And do you know this? Someone found out about it in the community. And to my right in the front row was a 6'4" transvestite, dressed like a woman, wig, makeup. You can see the beard coming through the makeup. Sitting there, and I remember when I was preaching, I wasn't really paying much attention, but I just thought there's a really tall woman who's sitting over there. But I never really looked. I knew that there was a woman there, I just never looked. Little did I know until after the message that this person was a transvestite. And I talked to our people about how important it is to love people. And that you might not agree, we might be doctrinally and all. There's a difference between the political aspect of it and the personal aspect of it. And that's kind of what I separated. And we are called to win people to Jesus. And Jesus went to the sinners and the worst of worst and loved them and built a relationship with them. And I believe I was clear on where we stood as a church when it came to biblical marriage. That was crystal clear. But you know what? I'd rather have a conversation than make a declaration, and so we feel better, but we've alienated everyone else around us. And I didn't know it, but 2 of our new Christians, husband and wife, just gotten saved a few months before, went over to this person and said, why don't you come to the diner with us afterwards? And they took this person to the diner, and everyone in the diner was staring at him. And they just had a meal together, and this man said, You know, I felt so loved today. And I know we don't see things eye to eye, but I wouldn't hesitate to ever come back here because I felt love and I felt Jesus. Isn't that amazing? But see, these are questions that people are wanting to ask. And so you might not like the harvest that God gives you, but you have to do it. And my last point, and I'll before I do too much damage, believe in the harvest. If our worship team could come up, believe in the harvest. And the farmer has a vision of the finished product before he even plants a seed. He can already envision where the corn's going to be growing, where the winter wheat is going to be growing. He's already envisioning all that. He has a vision for it. And once he plants it, he trusts in the process. Hosea 10:12 said, "Plant the good seeds of righteousness, and you will harvest a crop of love. Plow up the hard ground of your hearts, for now is the time to seek the Lord, that he may come and shower righteousness upon you." Man, we have such a great opportunity as a church. But the church is made up of individual lives. And I don't know about you, but I have always thought in my life, from the day I gave my life to Christ, I've always thought, Lord, I don't ever want to live a mediocre life. I don't ever want to live a life of status quo. I want to be on the edge. I want my life to make a difference. I want to win as many people for the kingdom as that I possibly could in my life. I just envision us standing before the throne of God and there being a couple of million people standing behind us, and we say, God, who are these people? And he says, these are all the people that came to know me because of your life on earth. Not everything that I do now I'm going to see immediate results, but I'm going to trust in the process. I'm going to have a vision. When you look at this phenomenal facility that you guys have, I'm jealous. We're in a warehouse and in a bar. When I pulled up, I'm like, man, if I could put this on a trailer and take it to New York, it would rock. But there's not one pew here that God didn't already preordain someone sitting in. Just look around. Can you see it full of your sons and daughters? Can you see your neighbor sitting there? Can you see the guy that you work with that's a jerk right now, but when he comes to Jesus, he's going to be the most awesome cat you've ever seen? Can you see it? Can you look around? Can you see it? I can see it. When Elijah went to the widow, I think it was Zarephath, and she was ready to starve, and her son, and he said, I want you to go out and gather as many jars as you can. And this was the principle. It's a planting and harvest principle. If she got 2 jars, she was going to get 2 jars of oil, wasn't she? But as long as she kept providing jars from her neighbors, the oil kept flowing. Every time, Pastor Rob, that you have a vision to put a coffee bar in, it might not be for the seasoned believer. We don't need coffee to love Jesus. But for the person who's never been to church before, that's disarming for them. Every time you make room, you are providing another jar so that God can fill it. Every time you start a new ministry to touch people, you're giving them another jar. You're building another silo. Because you're preparing for the harvest.